She was about to sign without understanding German until the cleaning lady's daughter took control. "Don't forget to comment what country you're watching us from." It all began in an elegant, silent boardroom, where the lawyer, Hans Müller, was on the verge of signing a multi-million-dollar contract. His serious face contrasted with the tension hanging in the air. Across from him, two executives in immaculate suits watched him with a forced smile as they slid a thick document in German his way. Hans, born in Colombia, had lived his whole life in Austria, but he never learned to read the language fluently. He trusted that the deal was clean. No one dared to doubt the German partners until a girl no older than 10, the daughter of the woman who cleaned the building, spoke up from the corner. "That paper doesn't say what you think it does," the girl murmured, looking at the lawyer with surprising seriousness. Everyone turned their heads. The silence was immediate. The executives looked at each other, uncomfortable. The girl, whose name was Lena, had been waiting there for her mother without bothering anyone. But she had read part of the contract while the adults were talking, and something didn't add up. Hans furrowed his brow, perplexed. "What do you mean? It doesn't say what I think," he asked. The little girl looked at him with unusual courage. "They're trying to take your properties in Colombia. It's in clause 14.3. Down in the fine print. It says you're signing everything away with no right to any claim." One of the partners, the younger one, tried to laugh. "Come on, are you going to take a little girl seriously? This is ridiculous." But the other, older one cut him off with a nervous gesture. Hans, now sweating, took the document and turned it toward the girl. "Can you read it again, please?" The girl came closer and, in a clear voice, translated the exact passage, word for word. The room fell into absolute silence. The lawyer looked at the partners, who no longer seemed so confident. "Why didn't you tell me this before? You knew I don't read German." "It was a minor drafting error, nothing serious," the bearded executive replied, trying to calm the situation. But Hans's expression was no longer one of doubt. It was one of contained fury. Little Lena didn't flinch. She knew exactly what she had seen. Her mother then entered the room, bewildered to see her daughter speaking with high-level businessmen. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hans. I didn't want Lena to be a bother," she said timidly. Hans stood up and stared at the men on the other side of the table. "Your daughter hasn't bothered me. She has saved me." The partners tried to regain control. "Look, we can renegotiate. Perhaps a better distribution of assets. We'll sign now and correct the terms later." Hans let out a bitter laugh. "Correct it later? After I've handed over everything? How many people have signed with you without knowing what they were signing?" The executives remained silent. The atmosphere grew increasingly dense. Lena held her gaze. She had grown up among office hallways, cleaning desks with her mother. She listened, she observed, she learned. No one had ever noticed her intelligence. Hans walked slowly to the window, taking a deep breath. In that moment, he remembered his father, a farmer who had lost his land by signing something he didn't understand. He closed his eyes, containing his rage. "You took advantage of my trust, of my ignorance of the language, and not just mine. How many others?" he repeated. The executives didn't answer. The only sounds were the soft hum of the air conditioning and the lawyer's ragged breathing. The tension could be cut with a knife. It was then that one of them stood up and said with disdain, "Are you really going to let a little brat ruin this deal? This will cost you a fortune." And in that instant, Hans understood that it was no longer just a legal matter. It was personal. It was a struggle between what was right and what was easy. And thanks to a girl nobody saw, what was right was beginning to find its way through. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment what you think of it. Lena's mother, embarrassed, tried to lead her away, but Hans stopped her with a gesture. "She's not leaving. I need her here." The words resonated like a declaration. In that moment, one of the partners grabbed the contract and tried to hide it among other papers, but Hans was no longer the same man who had walked into that room. He picked up his phone, dialed a number, and said in a firm voice, "Maria, get me a certified legal translator right now. This is going to change." But before hanging up, he added, his eyes locked on the executives, "And get ready, because word of this is getting out." The man who tried to hide the contract jumped up abruptly, throwing the papers on the table. "This is a waste of time," he yelled. "You know perfectly well that without our investment, your project is worthless. You said so yourself a week ago." Hans didn't flinch. He watched coldly as the older partner, visibly nervous, tried to calm his colleague. Lena stood her ground, hugging her mother, who no longer knew whether to stay or go. The tension was reaching a dangerous point. Hans knew he was losing allies, prestige, and even the respect of some colleagues who had trusted in this deal. But what he had just discovered made it clear to him that there was no turning back. The minutes passed slowly. No one spoke. When the legal translator finally arrived, rushed to the room, the executives made excuses that there was a misunderstanding, that it wasn't the time to review the terms, that the contract was already in its final stage. But Hans insisted. The woman sat down, skimmed the document, and her expression hardened with every page. "This is not a misunderstanding. It's a total transfer of assets with irrevocable clauses and penalties for early termination. It's an abuse of trust." Hans squeezed his eyes shut, feeling a pang in his chest. He had been on the verge of signing away his ruin. His father, wherever he was, deserved justice. One of the executives stood up. "This is a betrayal. We opened the door to Europe for you," he exclaimed, pointing an accusing finger. "A door or a trap?" Hans replied without raising his voice. "Because it seems you were only looking to take what's mine. You know I'm exhausted from fighting, from negotiating. You saw me as weak, and just when you thought you could take advantage, someone appeared who was actually paying attention." Everyone looked at Lena. The girl didn't understand the full scope of what she had done, but she knew she had saved someone from an injustice. Her mother, her eyes full of tears, squeezed her hand in silence. The tension reached its breaking point when the executives threatened to sue him for breach of prior agreements. Hans, for a moment, felt defeated. He thought of the years of work, of the constant struggle to be respected in a country where he was always seen as the foreigner. He thought about giving up, signing any, losing everything, and leaving it all behind. Fear paralyzed him. But then the translator, an older woman, approached and put a hand on his shoulder. "My husband lost his workshop because of a contract like this. Don't let them destroy you. You are not alone." That sentence broke something inside him. It wasn't about business anymore. It was a cause that went beyond that. Hans straightened up and, in a voice firmer than ever, declared, "This contract is null and void as of this moment. I will send it to the Bar Association and to the press if necessary." The executives turned pale. They knew that if the news got out, their reputations would be tarnished throughout Europe. "You'll regret this," one of them whispered through clenched teeth. "Maybe," Hans said, "but I'll sleep with a clear conscience." In that instant, he received a call. It was the director of an ethical German fund that had been keeping track of him for some time. He had heard about the incident. "We're interested in your project, and we don't negotiate with hidden clauses," he said firmly. In the days that followed, the story went viral, not because of Hans, but because of Lena, a girl who had read a contract and prevented an injustice. Local media told the story of how a cleaning lady's daughter had saved a Latino businessman from losing everything. The rival company underwent an internal investigation. One of the partners resigned amidst the scandal. The other was suspended for fraudulent practices. Meanwhile, Hans was invited to speak about business ethics and legal transparency at universities and public forums, but he never mentioned his victory without remembering Lena. Hans invited Lena's mother to work with him in his new office with a better salary and decent hours. But he didn't stop there. He personally made sure that Lena received a full scholarship to study languages and law. "You have a talent that cannot be wasted," he told her. The girl smiled with that mix of shyness and pride that only those who have done something great, without realizing it, can have. Her mother, through tears, simply said, "Thank you for seeing us, for not treating us as if we were invisible." Today, years later, Hans remembers that day as the moment everything changed, not because of a great lawyer or a legal strategy, but because of a girl who had nothing to gain except justice. Because in the end, you never know who is behind the mask. Appearances can be deceiving, but respect and dignity must always be non-negotiable. Ask ChatGPT. Yeah,